Hi everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about targeting. We just finished our last section. We finished segmentation. And so segmentation, targeting kind of go together. And so we did sort of the first half of separating our groups. And now we're going to do the next half and we're going to actually pick the one. And we're going to use a great example about how they looked at their segmentation and they were able to pick a target market that ultimately made them a very successful company and brand. And so by the end of today's lesson, after segmenting your customers, you'll be able to choose which segment to target and why. So segmentation was broken into a few different areas. So the first thing we did in segmentation, we talked about who, what, and why. And so once you do that and you have multiple groups of segments or customers that are purchasing your products, now the job is to try to figure out which group is the best. Which group can we maximize our marketing towards to make the most profitable? One thing you want to remember is not always the easiest group is the most profitable group. So you really want to try to find the group that's easy, but also more importantly is actually going to make you profitable long term. Because there often are groups that you find that will be really easy to improve your business, but ultimately just don't make you any money. And so when you're doing this process, you want to think about three different things that will sort of move you forward. And those three things are evaluating the attractiveness of each target market. You're gonna go through each section and see like which ones make us most profitable, which ones are easiest to reach, which one do we think is actually have growth. And we're gonna sort of talk about that in a little bit later in today's lesson. And then the next one is you're gonna select which one or two that you think are the best. Ideally, you don't really wanna have more than one or two different groups, but if you get too many, then you start to sort of dilute your attractiveness and it kind of becomes bland or vague, and it's something that you really want to try to avoid. You really want to keep it as focused on one target segment as much as possible. It will allow you to sort of tailor your marketing and everything, your products, to that one specific group of people. And then once you do that, of course, you choose that group, then you can begin tailoring your marketing and your products and everything to meet the needs of that group so that it becomes a win-win for both of you. The brand we're going to talk about today is White Claw. White Claw is a brand that has absolutely exploded on the market since 2016 and absolutely crushing all of the competition as well that's tried to enter it and kind of copy it basically. And the reason is because they've done such a great job of connecting with their target market. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to 2016 when White Claw first launched, and we're going to actually look at the target market that they saw, and you can see why they were able to become so successful. And so if you go back to 2016, you can look at this type of a group, this market that existed, this group of people. So the first thing that was in that group were, roughly 25% of men just don't enjoy drinking beer. But if you remember back at that time, if you were old enough, to think back, like the craft beer boom was exploding. Maybe you went to these craft beer breweries with your parents or family or friends, and if you remember that time going with your parents, it was all about like big, thick, heavy beers. They had the IPAs and triple IPAs and all these different kind of brands, pale ales. But one thing to think about that really sort of influenced that group was that one, they're massive calories, and two, a lot of the craft beer beers have high alcohol rates. So those two things that people didn't really, where else could we go? So you had things that were unhealthy, people were looking for healthier drinks. You had men that wanted to drink something that wasn't beer, but then the alternatives are sort of wine or hard alcohol. Well, what if I just want to just kind of hang out? I don't want to get smashed, or I want to have it packed in my cooler and bring it with me. And so you're looking for drinks that you can bring with you that are still sort of, masculine maybe, but they're not beer. And so that was one market we're looking at. The next one, which was just kind of funny, that started to take off and became just as big, was LaCroix. LaCroix was sort of the first really big, famous, like seltzer, bubbly water. And now you have bubbly and you have all these other brands that have very become similar. But that was also taking place at the same time. And then you have millennials who are getting older, but more importantly, you have Gen Z. Gen Z has gotten much older. Now they're all over 21. And these two groups of people are much different consumers than the previous generations. And the biggest thing being is they're just much more gender neutral. They don't want to have the burden of, I must act this way because I'm a man, or I must act this way because I'm a woman. They want to be able to just sort of be who they are. White Claw and this target market, do they have a good match? And so there's 5 things that we're going to go over, 5 criteria that you usually want to sort of check the boxes on to make sure that this is the right group of people, or this is the right segment for you to go after. So the first one is market size. The second one is expected growth. The third one is competitive position. The fourth one's cost to reach. And then the fifth one is company fit. So here's just a quick breakdown of each one using White Claw. So the first one is market size and expected growth. We're going to kind of clump those together. Is it big enough? Well, we already said 25% of men don't like drinking beer. And so there's a huge group right there that's looking for something else. That's a large chunk of people when you think of everyone over the age of 21. And then the next thing is you have the expected growth coming from this whole LaCroix, which then became bubbly, boom, that's sort of taking place in the soft drink market as people no longer want to drink Gatorades or juices or just regular colas and soft drinks. And so the combination of these two sort of coming together totally checks box 1 and box 2. And then the next one is competitive position. Do they have competitive position? Of course they do. So at the time, there were no other alcohol seltzer drinks. This was the first one in the market. There are some that claim they're ahead, but this is the real first legit one that was out there. So they absolutely have the competitive position. And then cost to reach, because brands were so focused on the previous generations and sort of neglecting the millennials and the Gen Zs as they're approaching, they really didn't have that much competition. And one of the things that they did that was really unique was they were willing to fully embrace social media. They went after Instagram. They went after influencers. They had meme accounts making fun of them. They hired some sort of controversial influencers that they thought like could really push them and connect them with those generations. And they, to be honest, they did a great job at it. And then the last one is company fit. Here's the crazy thing. The company that owns the brand White Claw is also the same company that owns Mike's Hard Lemonade. So they've been in this industry already for 10, 15, 20 years, making moves and learning who the customers are. And so what I want to do is just take a second here and talking about how White Claw was able to adapt their marketing to match this target market to become the crazy successful brand they are today. So the first one is White Claw drinks are low calorie, low alcohol, only 5% alcohol, and they're gluten free. And the last thing is it comes in a nice can that you can carry with you to the beach, to the pool, camping, to sports games, anywhere you want to go, just hanging out in the front yard, whatever it is, picnics. It's easy to carry with you. You're not going to get smashed after 1 or 2 of them. And it's a healthy thing. It's sort of a guilt-free, a little bit of alcohol you can consume. The next thing is the cans. The cans and the names of the cans, the logos, the flavors. It's very, very gender neutral, which absolutely connects with Gen Z and the millennials on a great way that has never really existed previous to them. You know, they're very tall, narrow cans that look nice. They're colorful, but they're very gender neutral. They do a fantastic job of that. And the last thing is the cans are affordable. The price is cheap. It's not expensive. Because again, millennials and Gen Zs have proven that instead of spending money on high expensive brands and sort of look at me type of brands, they're all about the experiences. They much rather go traveling. You know, as you know, all of you go studying abroad and people want to travel to Europe and to Asia and to tropical beaches. This is something that really, really matters because their lives are focused around experiences much more than past and previous generations. And so again, you can see how they've done such a great job. And I already touched on briefly how they've done such a fantastic job of connecting with this group of customers through social media. They fully embrace social media, unlike how other brands have in the past. And so the last thing we're going to talk about is ethics. And the reason we talk about this is because anytime you're dealing with target marketing and you're trying to focus on your customers, you got to find your job is to make their life more comfortable. But we've already talked about multiple times, your job is not to exploit them. You never want to exploit your customers. That's the worst thing you can do. Because we all know that time where you're talking to a friend about something. You know, I'm a dad. You know, I drink Mountain Dew. It was trendy when I was a kid. I still drink Mountain Dew once in a while. But here's what's crazy. I'll be going on my Instagram, and there's Mountain Dew commercial right there, right in front of me. And that kind of freaks me out a little bit. Why is Mountain Dew out of all the brands coming on my Instagram when I talk about Mountain Dew? You know, I remember, and that's just not, I know it's supposed to be more comfortable, but it also is kind of creepy. And so you just want to keep in mind, if you do go into marketing and you're talking about your social, you're using your social media or whatever it is, that you're on TV and stuff, there's a fine line of like knowing your customers and knowing your customers, right? So make sure you just sort of always keep that in the back of your mind as you're moving on in your career in this site. And so thanks again, and hopefully by the end of today, you were able to understand who your customers were, who your segment is, and you can actually explain what they are and what they care about and how you're doing to connect with them. So again, thanks a lot. Have a great day. Take care, and we'll connect soon.